Hello, I'm back. Did you miss me? And now we have to do all these things, you know, change chairs and microphones every 20 minutes. So it's the life that we have right now. So welcome to our second debate this afternoon. We are now receiving Filipe Santos. She's Dean from CATÓLICA-LISBON. He's an academic, entrepreneur, serial innovator, Dean of CATÓLICA-LISBON School of Business and Economics, Professor of Social Entrepreneurship, Social Innovation Leader in 2019, and is also Chair of European Venture Philanthropy Association and member of the Investment Committee of the Social Innovation Fund. Filipe Santos, welcome.
My pleasure. Thank you, Fernanda.
Thank you so much. And you also, I have to say, a co-founder of the Social Business School and Laboratory for Social Investment, YES, in Portugal, where I'm alumni, and I'm so thankful for the existence of YES and the work, the amazing work you've done there, and you're still doing, of course, now in university level. So, Filipe, you listened to the previous panel and you told me, well, it's completely aligned with what I have to say, because talking about education with social impact has a lot to do with parenting, with empower our kids to be activists, and then afterwards, after our youthness, so when you get around maybe 30, 40, like some people I know, go to a school and learn all over again and talk about social impact, which is one of my favorite themes. So thank you, Filipe, for having time, for being here with us.
It's my pleasure to be here with you, Fernanda. Another great social innovator.
Thank you so much. So, regarding this education with social impact, so we no longer educate our kids and sometimes our parents, we educate with the perspective of having social impact.
Yeah, no, I think I brought some initial words that I would like to share with you, because I think that it's sometimes useful to put things in a more historical perspective. So I wanted to do that about the value of entrepreneurship, education, some of the trends that I'm seeing, then how that converges on education, and particularly the focus that we should have in the new generation. And I think 40 years ago, we started a revolution, and that was in the 80s, the technology entrepreneurship revolution. And what happened then was that entrepreneurs, innovators started to deploy the latest technologies and create and explore market opportunities, leading to a new wave of innovation. And that was amazing in terms of the innovation that it created. And that allowed, in a way, our system, capitalism, to be kind of this very powerful machine for getting innovations to market, developing new products and services, and building new economic development and growth. So that has happened over the last 40 years. Out of many of the biggest companies in the world today were creating during this period. 7 out of the top 10 companies in the world today were created in the last few years. So that's very powerful. But at the same time, as that was happening, another more silent revolution was also happening. And that is the social entrepreneurship revolution, especially, I would say, that accelerated in the last 20 years, since the 2000s. And that was the concept of citizens that were challenged by the issues that they saw in society, and they wanted to tackle them, but they wanted to do that also with the entrepreneurship and innovation mindset, and often a business approach. And that started to happen, and with that development, we have new industries that were created, like microfinance. We had new global platforms that were developed, like Wikipedia or TED. And what that did was this another distributed system of innovation in which individual citizens, challenged by the issues that they saw, they wanted to tackle them, and they got connected, and they started their own mission and created innovation. So have these two revolutions, I would say, happening, one much more visible, the other a bit more silent, but also fundamental. What I think is happening in the last 5 years is there is a convergence of these two trends, and a conversion what I would call the impact entrepreneurship. So a new wave of entrepreneurs, innovators, citizens are deploying the latest technologies, innovative thinking, to really, sometimes with a profit arm, because profit basically creates surplus that leads to further growth. It doesn't have to be there, but it's not bad that it's there if it's associated with value creation. So entrepreneurs started with to deploy these innovations to really try to move capitalism forward. We heard earlier today John Elkington speaking about regenerative capitalism. And it's basically this big machine that we created for distributed innovation that was leading to economic growth and more GDP. Now we are shifting this machine with the work of all of us collectively to a mode where multiple outcomes are achieved and outcomes that we all care about. A more inclusive economy and inclusive products, a more sustainable economy for the planet. And this is happening as we speak. So this is very powerful, it's transformational. But I would say it's hundreds, it's thousands of impact entrepreneurs with this mindset, and that is not enough. If we really want this revolution to be able to shift the balance of capitalism, to shift it towards a more inclusive and holistic approach to economic activity and value creation, we need not only to continue with the developments that we have now, but we need to educate and empower, or sometimes to free the new generation, some of which we heard just now, to really take charge of some of the issues that we are seeing and really develop. And I wanted to speak a few words about Generation Z. We had the baby boomers, Generation X, Generation Y, and we are between X and Y, I think. We like to see ourselves as Y.
The alphabet is over, oh my God.
And then Z is the last one. But it's the people who are between 10 and 24 years old right now. And they are often in the educational system of our societies. And they are a very special generation, I would say. And they are probably the most powerful generation that has ever lived. They are tremendously connected. On average, at the age of 10, a child on the Western world receives a smartphone connected to the internet with all the good and bad things that has, connected to the world. They can develop a global awareness and a kind of a Planetiers attitude because they are exposed to what's happening in every country in the world. They have access to all of that information. So they can develop a global conscience, a planetary conscience that I think our generation didn't have.
Yes.
And finally, they have an amazing ability to connect with each other and to mobilize. And I think the movement of Greta Thunberg and the climate action movement is a great example of the power of that connection. And so when deployed in that way, they can really mobilize and get organized to achieve the goals that they care about. So in that sense, they are the most powerful generation that has ever lived. Now, we all know, and I think we're discussing about parenting earlier, and we all know as parents of teenagers, how afraid we are that our children will get lost in all of the attractiveness of the digital world, all of the mindless activity that they can engage with, and that they can use these amazing tools not for empowering themselves, but to lose themselves.
Yeah.
And that's a fear that we all have. So on one hand, I would like to speak directly to the people here and in the global audience who are part of this Generation Z, that are between 10 and 24 years old. You have an extreme amount of power in your hands to create the change that we all want to see. You have in your hands, in your pockets, in your networks, all the tools that you need and that society has created in the last 20 years to allow you to enact change. So if you choose to be inspired by that possibility, and if you build a purposeful life and career, you will be unstoppable as a generation. Now, our role, I think, is to allow that to really happen and not constrain that and not prevent that from happening. And so that's part of what I think the education system should also deliver and what we need to do. And I think, and here, some of the things that I wanted to share with you are amazingly similar. I was struck by some of the key points that Francis shared with us today, which shows that from different perspectives, we know what needs to be done. We just need to get our act together and actually do it. And I think it starts by, in the educational system, embedding some of the elements, and it starts in the early days and the early age with emotional intelligence and the ethics of care. Training and practicing this idea of getting away from ourselves and our self-centrism, which is so typical of young children, and building empathy towards others, towards specific others, towards the world, the planet, the collective other as well. And that emotional intelligence and that ethics of care is the basis of all that follows. And then I think we need to give them also some tools to analyze the world around them, because the world is so complex, issues are so difficult and entrenched that even us get paralyzed and feel there's nothing that I can do. Things are too complex. So some tools, some instruments to look at a societal issue, a social problem, maybe at the local level, dissect it into its different elements and go to the essence of it and start to tackle it. Those are some tools and instruments that you can use, and are very powerful to actually cut away from the complexity towards the essence. And here, we, as we grow up, we create a lot of biases and conventional wisdoms and norms, and sometimes we are blinded to what's possible. Children are more free, and they can be tremendously innovative if we just point them to the issue and say, now go and solve this.
Yes,
and they have no constraints, no limits. So we need to allow that to happen. We need to empower them, to move them to action, not only think about it, but acting within their schools and their communities, and even sometimes tackling global issues from a local perspective. And if we as a society are able to do this, not constrained but free this next generation, I think we will see an amazing transformation. Also because we don't need everyone to be an impact entrepreneur. Not everyone has the entrepreneurial mindset. It can be trained, can be practiced. Some people are natural at it, others build it over time. But if 5 or 10% of the people in a generation have this attitude, have this leadership ability, the 30 and 40% will follow, and then everyone will be in the same mindset. And so what we need is to embed these in the school curriculum, make it very practical and applied, but these principles, and we can have really a tremendous impact with the new generation.
Even before university, because the first, well, not the first time, but the one time I got to your university, Católica-LISBON School of Business and Economics. And I shall say that I was very surprised that instead of Roy's, you were speaking about S-Roy's. And I was like, oh my God, is it possible?
It's changing.
It's changing because Católica is one of the best schools of business and economics in Portugal and all over the world. And suddenly I got into a classroom, and this gentleman was talking about social impact and telling things like, you don't have to have the best company in the world, you can have the best company for the world. And I was like, whoa. So economics, business, so you mean money, capitalism can be taught at the same time as social impact. And in fact, you're getting students younger and younger, especially on your social entrepreneurship class, right?
Yes. No, I think we need to start, the issues that I'm talking about, we need to start them
even before.
Very early.
Yes.
I would say at 10 years old, when they go to maybe the 5th grade, emotional intelligence you can build even before that in children. But of course, the university is a special moment in the lives of young people. They now feel they are major in terms of age. They are somewhat more freer than before. They are more connected, and they can achieve a lot. So those are very instrumental years in the life of a young person between 18 and 23, 24.
And that's when we feel we can really change the world,
yes.
right? We are so powerful.
But you need to instill that mentality earlier,
yes,
so that they practice it, and then when they get to the university, they can really give kind of a shape to what they do. And I can tell you that currently I'm the dean of the business school. I feel a huge responsibility as leader of a business school and a professor of social entrepreneurship to say, what are we doing to really train the next generation of impact entrepreneurs, of impact leaders? How are we giving this generation the tools to be able to change the world? And this is not changing the world at trying to fight against the world, or trying to fight against capitalism or trying to fight against system, because when you create a conflict, you may get a disruptive revolution, and that sometimes has unintended consequences. I believe that clever entrepreneurs, they work within the system. They see other people as allies and partners and not as enemies. And sometimes the guy or the company that you think is the enemy can be the most powerful ally if you show that person the other perspective. And if you show the value of bringing the social and the environmental component into their metrics, if you show the spillover that has in their business, why work against people when you can work with people?
With the people, yeah. So, and regarding young kids, so yes, could have a kindergarten, maybe, right? So I'm talking about the school, one of the main laboratories of social impact entrepreneurship in Portugal, which is now in Cascais still. Yes, and maybe a kindergarten will be a very nice idea, because I think all of us social entrepreneurs have this, we have all this, we're more or less like coronavirus. We contaminate everybody in a good way, right? So when we arrive, we talk about our passions, the way we solve social issues, and if you get this to the kids and talk to the kids and say, and giving this sometimes very simple examples, and kids get really excited and start trying to change things, small things in their community.
Let me share a story that I like very much, which is, so sometimes social entrepreneurs, they when they innovate in amazingly simple ways, and they achieve their goals and the issues that they want to tackle in a way that we would never think about. So one project that I like a lot is called Roots of Empathy, which is this one about building emotional intelligence and ethics of care in children. And what they do is so simple that is kind of amazing. They place a baby in a classroom for very young kids, usually between 6 and 10 years old, or 6 and 12, so they get a young parent or mother has volunteers to bring their baby to the classroom, and in weekly workshops they have the baby as the center, and they do a lot of workshops and exercises for the children in the class to put themselves in the perspective of the baby, so the perspective taking, and how does the baby see the world, and that's the first step of empathy.
Yes.
And then why don't you now take care of this baby for a few minutes and say how that feels and be attentive to their needs, so the ethics of care. And they build a program, and that program over the next following months has an amazing impact on reducing bullying in school and improving the way that kids connect with each other, because it builds that muscle of empathy. So that's just an example of what you can do in the starting days. And then you can follow that with this idea of look around to the issues that you want to tackle in your society. How would you go about it? Now go and try it at the local level and get connected. So that you can do a bit later.
Yes.
So when they get to the university, they are ready to do
they have the roots,
to do global things with technology, or sometimes with very simple technologies that are now enables. Sometimes the most amazing innovations are very simple.
But we have, regarding technology, we have Apps for Good, which is also a Portuguese project with winning a lot of prizes, international prizes, that has to do with it. So kids develop some apps, but only thinking of doing good for the world. It's amazing. The Apps for Good is another good example. There's also a movement regarding our schools from 10, 11 to 16, Escolas Solidárias, and all the kids in Portugal embrace a cause, and not only, you know, recycling or helping the elder crossing the street. They really do make a difference in their communities.
But there's an important point I wanted to make. We have a lot of amazing projects, as the ones that you are describing, and they are usually put as an add-on on top of the curriculum of the school. And I think the change that we need to really think through and implement is how would we rethink and redesign the curriculum in order not to look necessarily at the world in disciplines and just develop knowledge on each discipline. How do we use the knowledge that's available to really integrate it and to tackle issues? How do we build these entrepreneurial empowerment attitudes in children so that they really feel that they can be positive change makers in the world? Because that's what will drive, I think, our collective prosperity and future will depend on the drive, on the capabilities, on the power of the new generation, who will be leading companies in 20 years. They will be the policymakers and the politicians. And so that's what we need to embed now in the curriculum, not as an add-on, but that as a central part of our educational system.
So you're a very optimistic Planeteer.
I am, I would say, I tend to see the glass half full. I'm a bit concerned with what I'm seeing lately, not only in terms of the pandemic that's affecting all of us, but also in terms of the geopolitical nonsense that we are seeing. So we tend to ask, are there any adults in the room anymore? And I say, well, maybe let's get the adults out and let's bring the young people, because I think they know what needs to be done. And so I would say I'm mildly positive right now, and I would say that we need all to really be at our best if you want to move the planet and our society in the way that we will aspire to.
And I think that listening to people like you and talking to people like you and learning from people like you, it's a good start. Thank you, Filipe, for being here, for
pleasure.
taking half an hour with us.
Planetiers,
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'll be back in 5 minutes with Gustavo Carona. Thank you.